Hi, I'm Emily here at the Whale Interpretive Center in Telegraph Cove. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than some of the other WIC clips we've done. It's going to be looking at the language that we use to discuss killer whales, and this is really going to help anyone who wants to learn more about killer whales but finds the language that we talk about them confusing because there's a lot of terminology. So this will really help if you're visiting the Whale Interpretive Center in the future to get more out of a tour. If you're going whale watching, if you're just kind of doing some reading, this should really help to kind of understand what we're talking about. If you'd like to hear this video en français, check out my coworker Audra's video. She's going to be doing it in French for us as well. So we're going to start off really general and move to more specific. Of course, generally killer whale versus orca. Killer whale comes from killer of whales. Of course, some species of killer whales do eat other whales, and that's where the name came from. Orcanus orca, the Latin, got shortened to orca. The Latin actually means fish from the underworld. So a lot of people try and use orca to avoid what they think is the stigma of killer whale. You're not actually really avoiding it. It's, they can be used interchangeably, but both have kind of a negative stigma, so use whichever one you like. Underneath killer whale, generally, we have ecotypes. So there's actually 10 different types of killer whales worldwide. We're really lucky to have 3 in British Columbia. And we're going to compare and contrast our BC ecotypes in another video. But for the time being, all you need to think about is these animals speak different languages, they live in different places, they eat different foods, and they do not breed together. These are separate animals. Of course, they all look the same, which is very confusing. And so definitely if you see a killer whale in Australia, it's not going to be the same type of killer whale that you see here in British Columbia. Within the northern resident community, which is one of our ecotypes in this area, we're going to be talking about these guys a little bit more because this is who we see here, and there's a lot of language that's associated with these guys as well. Keep in mind that a lot of the language I'm going to be talking about may not apply to all types of killer whales. It may only apply to these northern residents or the southern residents, their southern Vancouver Island counterpart. So we have clans. Clans are these 3 color zones on the board, and these are language groups. So this means that if I'm an A-clan killer whale, I speak the same language as everybody else in A-clan, and therefore do not breed with anybody else in A-clan. I'm only going to breed with someone who speaks a different language than me, and this is to avoid inbreeding. So this is a really good solution. Within clans, we have pods, and this is a common misconception. Oh, I saw a pod of killer whales. You might see a pod of killer whales, but a pod is a group of matrilines that we'll talk about in a sec. So for example, the G12 pod includes the G2 matriline, the G8s, and the G27s. All of these animals belong to this one pod, but they don't always travel together. And so the pods are groups of animals that are more closely related to one another than they are to the rest of their clan. You could almost think of it like extended family. The matriline is really kind of the base unit of killer whale's social organization. The matrilines never separate. They're led by the female. In this case, G2 is leading her children and grandchildren. And if the female lives old enough, she'll see multiple generations. And so nobody ever leaves these matrilineal groups. So she's leading her children, both male and female, stay with mom. And then of course, in matrilines, we have individuals. We identify these animals like we talked about in our identification video, so check that out for more detail. But we look at the dorsal fin and the saddle patch. The great big tall dorsal fins belong to post-pubescent males, so that's how we tell sex. And so this is a really good way to kind of categorize these animals and talk about them, but it's certainly a lot of lingo to learn. So if you'd like to learn more about killer whales or any of the language I've talked about here today, definitely stop by the Whale Interpretive Center.